Hello, and welcome back to Speak English Daily.
Hi, everyone. We are very happy to see you here today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Speak English Daily, the place where you can relax, listen to natural conversations, and improve your English step by step. I'm Anna, and it's really nice to have you here with us again today.
And I'm Mike. Hello to everyone listening around the world right now. Maybe you're at home, maybe you're traveling, or maybe you're simply taking a quiet break with a warm drink. Wherever you are, we're glad you're spending this time with us.
Mike, can I ask you something?
Of course, what's on your mind?
When did tea become so complicated?
Complicated? Tea? I always thought tea was one of the simplest drinks in the world.
That's exactly what I thought too. But last weekend, something happened that completely changed the way I look at tea.
Now you've got my attention. What happened?
I went to a new tea shop that just opened near my apartment. It looked very cozy from the outside, so I thought I would go in, order a cup of tea, and relax for a few minutes.
Sounds like a good plan so far.
That's what I thought. But then I looked at the menu.
Uh-oh.
The menu was huge. I expected maybe 4 or 5 choices, but there were so many different types of tea.
Like what?
Green tea, white tea, black tea, oolong tea, jasmine tea, herbal tea, matcha, chai, and several names I had never heard before.
That's already more options than most people expect.
Exactly. And each one had a small description next to it. Some talked about floral flavors, some talked about earthy aromas, and some mentioned where the tea leaves came from.
That sounds more like a wine menu than a tea menu.
That's what it felt like. I just stood there staring at the menu for a while, thinking, where is the normal tea?
The tea that simply says, tea.
Yes, just tea, nothing else.
So what did you do?
After standing there for a minute, I finally went up to the counter and said, "Can I have a regular tea?"
I can imagine the response already.
The person working there smiled politely and asked, "What kind of tea would you like?"
And that's the question you were hoping to avoid.
Exactly, because I didn't know the answer. I suddenly realized I had never really thought about different kinds of tea before.
So how did you solve the situation?
I told the person behind the counter, "Maybe you can recommend something simple."
That's a smart move.
They suggested a classic black tea and said it was a good place to start.
And did you like it?
I did. It was warm, smooth, and actually much better than the tea I usually make at home.
Sometimes trying something new leads to a pleasant surprise.
That whole experience made me realize something interesting, though.
What did you realize?
Tea isn't just a simple drink anymore. For many people, it's a whole culture.
That's very true. People talk about tea in a very detailed way now.
They talk about where the tea leaves grow, how they are prepared, and how the flavor changes depending on the process.
Some people even spend time learning how to brew tea in the best way.
That's a great word, actually. Brew.
Yes, to brew means to make tea or coffee by mixing it with hot water.
I brew tea almost every evening at home.
Same here. It's part of my daily routine.
And tea often creates a calm moment in the day.
That's one of the reasons people love it so much.
You drink tea when you wake up, when you take a break, or when you want to relax after a long day.
And sometimes when you meet someone for a quiet conversation.
Exactly. Tea is often part of social moments too.
Which makes it a great topic for learning English.
Because the language around tea appears in everyday life.
Today we're going to talk about tea culture and how it fits into daily routines.
And along the way, you'll hear useful English words and phrases that you can start using in your own conversations.
So while we talk about tea, you'll also be learning natural English.
Before we continue, if you enjoy listening to calm and friendly conversations like this while improving your English, make sure to follow Speak English Daily so you don't miss our next episodes.
And if you know someone else who is learning English, you can share this podcast with them too. Learning together can make the process much more enjoyable.
Very true. All right, Mike, I have a question for you.
I'm ready.
Would you describe yourself as a serious tea person or a simple tea person?
That's a good question.
Take a moment and think about it.
I think I'm somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle?
Yes.
I enjoy trying different kinds of tea sometimes, but I'm also very happy with a simple cup.
I think I'm definitely on the simple side.
Nothing fancy?
Not usually.
A warm cup of tea with maybe a little sugar or lemon is perfect for me.
And honestly, that's the beauty of tea.
What do you mean?
Tea can be very simple, but it can also become something people explore deeply.
Some people know everything about tea leaves and flavors.
And some simply enjoy a warm cup and a quiet moment.
I think most of us fall somewhere between those two.
I agree.
And now I'm curious about the people listening today.
Me too.
Are you someone who enjoys discovering different kinds of tea, or do you prefer one familiar cup every day?
That's something to think about as we continue our conversation today.
All right, Mike. Since we're talking about tea culture today, I want to ask you something honestly. When you go somewhere and they offer tea, do you get excited about trying something new, or do you just want a simple cup and that's it?
I think it depends on the situation. If I'm at home, I usually drink the same kind of tea every day. But if I'm in a tea shop or visiting a new place, I do like trying different types.
That already sounds more adventurous than me.
Really?
Yes, when I think about tea, I imagine something simple and familiar. A warm cup, maybe a little sugar, and that's enough for me.
So you're a traditional tea drinker.
I guess so. I don't really need 10 different flavors in my cup.
But sometimes those different flavors can be interesting.
Maybe, but sometimes I feel like people make tea more complicated than it needs to be.
How so?
Well, have you ever heard someone describing tea with words like delicate, floral, or earthy?
Yes, I've heard that many times.
And I'm always thinking, it's just tea.
That's funny because some people really enjoy noticing those differences.
I'm sure they do, but for me, if the tea is warm and relaxing, that's already perfect.
I understand that, but I also enjoyed discovering new kinds of tea from time to time.
Like what?
For example, last month I tried a jasmine green tea that had a very light and fresh taste. It was different from the tea I normally drink.
And you liked it?
I did. It felt refreshing.
I think that's where we're different. You like exploring, and I like comfort.
That's a nice way to describe it.
But I also think many people start with simple tea and then slowly become curious about other types.
That's true. Sometimes curiosity grows naturally.
I remember when I first tried green tea. At the beginning, I didn't really like it.
That happens to many people.
The taste felt unusual to me.
That's a perfect example of something we call an acquired taste.
An acquired taste?
Yes, an acquired taste is something you may not enjoy the first time you try it, but after trying it several times, you begin to appreciate it.
Oh, I see.
For example, many people say black coffee is an acquired taste.
That makes sense. I remember the first time I tried coffee without sugar. I thought it was too strong.
Exactly. But after drinking it more often, some people begin to enjoy it.
So green tea was an acquired taste for me.
That sounds right.
At first, I wasn't sure about it, but after drinking it a few times, I started to like the flavor.
And now do you drink it regularly?
Sometimes, yes, especially when I want something lighter than black tea.
That's another interesting thing about tea. Different types can match different moods.
That's true. In the morning, I usually want something stronger.
Like black tea.
Yes, but in the evening, I prefer something softer, maybe an herbal tea.
Herbal tea can be very relaxing.
Especially after a long day.
That's one reason tea is such an important drink in many cultures.
It fits different moments of the day.
Morning energy, afternoon break, evening relaxation.
Exactly.
And the more people explore tea, the more they discover new varieties.
That sounds exciting for people who enjoy experimenting.
It can be, but at the same time, there's nothing wrong with enjoying the same simple cup every day.
I'm glad you said that.
Why?
Because sometimes when you hear people talking about tea in a very detailed way, you might feel like you're doing something wrong if you keep it simple.
But there's no right or wrong way to enjoy tea.
That's comforting to hear.
Tea should make life calmer, not more stressful.
I completely agree with that.
And I'm curious about something.
What's that?
The people listening right now probably have their own tea habits.
That's a good point.
Some people might drink the same kind of tea every day.
Others might love exploring different flavors and types.
And both approaches are perfectly fine.
So here's a question for everyone listening.
Think about your own habits.
Do you usually drink the same kind of tea every day, or do you enjoy trying new kinds whenever you can?
It's interesting to notice our small daily preferences.
Because those little choices often say something about our personalities.
And sometimes they simply show what makes us comfortable.
Either way, tea is one of those simple things that can become part of our daily life.
And sometimes part of our daily conversations, too.
Mike, there's something else I've noticed about tea.
What's that?
The more I pay attention to it, the more I realize people have little rituals around tea.
That's a great observation.
For example, in the evening, after dinner, I almost always make a cup of tea before I relax.
That sounds like a nice routine.
It really is. I put the kettle on, wait for the water to boil, and then I brew the tea.
There's that word again, brew.
Yes, we mentioned it earlier.
It's a very useful word. To brew means to make tea or coffee by mixing it with hot water.
So when I say I brew tea every evening, it simply means I prepare tea using hot water.
Exactly.
It's a small habit, but I look forward to it every day.
That's interesting because many people build small daily habits around tea.
Like afternoon tea.
Yes, in some cultures, the afternoon tea break is very important.
I love the idea of that, a short pause in the middle of the day.
A moment to slow down and reset.
Sometimes life feels very busy, and a cup of tea creates a little pause.
I feel the same way.
In fact, when I'm working for many hours, I often stand up and make tea just to take a short break.
That's a healthy habit.
It gives my mind a moment to rest.
And while the tea is brewing, you have a few minutes to step away from the screen.
Exactly. It's almost like a small reset for the brain.
That's a great way to describe it.
Do you have any tea habits like that?
Yes, actually. Every morning before I start working, I make a cup of tea and sit quietly for a few minutes.
That sounds peaceful.
It helps me start the day calmly instead of rushing immediately into work.
I think tea naturally encourages slower moments.
I agree.
Coffee sometimes feels fast and energetic.
But tea often feels gentle and steady.
That's probably why people associate tea with relaxation.
And comfort.
Another thing I've noticed is how different people prepare tea in different ways.
That's very true.
Some people use tea bags,
Which is the quickest method.
and others prefer loose tea leaves.
Yes, loose tea is often used by people who really enjoy the process of making tea.
They measure the leaves, pour the water carefully, and wait patiently.
It becomes almost like a small ceremony.
Exactly. Even the waiting time feels part of the experience.
That waiting period is interesting because it creates a moment of anticipation.
Anticipation meaning you're looking forward to something.
Right, you're waiting for the tea to be ready.
And sometimes those small waiting moments feel relaxing.
I think that's one reason tea culture has existed for such a long time in many parts of the world.
Because it encourages people to slow down.
And enjoy simple moments.
I also like the sound of tea being poured into a cup.
The gentle pouring sound?
Yes, it's strangely calming.
I know what you mean.
It's funny how such a simple drink can create these little peaceful moments in our day.
Sometimes the simplest things bring the most comfort.
I think tea does that for many people.
And over time, these small tea habits become part of daily life.
Almost like a quiet routine that we look forward to.
Exactly.
I'm curious about something, though.
What's that?
When people start drinking tea regularly, they often begin noticing small differences between types.
That's true.
At first, tea might just taste like tea,
But after a while, people start recognizing different flavors.
which means their appreciation slowly grows.
Yes, and that's often how tea culture develops for someone.
One small habit at a time.
One cup at a time.
And before they realize it, tea has become an important part of their routine.
A calm moment in an otherwise busy day.
Mike, I want to tell you something honestly.
That usually means a good story is coming.
Maybe not a story, but a confession.
Now I'm even more curious.
My relationship with tea is a little complicated.
Complicated? Tea usually feels very peaceful.
It is peaceful, but I've noticed something about myself. I don't just enjoy tea anymore. I kind of need it.
That sounds familiar.
Yesterday morning, I was in a hurry, so I left my apartment without drinking tea.
That's already a dangerous start to the day.
Exactly. At first, I didn't think it was a big problem.
But then something happened.
Around late morning, I started feeling very tired.
Even though the day had just begun.
Yes, my energy felt low and I couldn't focus on my work.
That's interesting.
And then I realized something. I hadn't had my morning tea.
That explains a lot.
The moment I thought about tea, it suddenly became the only thing I wanted.
That's the power of a daily habit.
I went to the kitchen, brewed a cup of tea, and waited.
And then,
About 20 minutes later, I felt much better.
your energy returned.
Exactly. I felt awake again.
That's a good moment to introduce an expression.
Which one?
Kick in.
Kick in?
Yes, when we say something kicks in, we mean the effect of something begins to work.
Oh, that makes sense.
For example, after you drink tea or coffee, the energy effect doesn't happen instantly.
It takes a little time.
Right. After maybe 15 or 20 minutes, the caffeine kicks in.
And suddenly you feel more awake.
Exactly.
That's exactly what happened to me yesterday.
Tea came to the rescue.
Yes. Before the tea kicked in, I felt slow and tired.
And after?
After that, I felt normal again.
That's why many people start their mornings with tea or coffee
It helps them wake up.
and focus on their day.
But sometimes I wonder if I drink too much tea.
That's an interesting question.
I usually drink 2 cups in the morning and maybe 1 in the afternoon.
That doesn't sound extreme.
Maybe not, but sometimes I think about reducing it.
Ah, another useful phrase.
Which one?
Cut back on.
Cut back on?
Yes, to cut back on something means to reduce how much of it you do or consume.
So if I say I want to cut back on tea, it means I want to drink less tea.
Exactly.
I've thought about cutting back before.
And did you?
Honestly, not really.
At least you're honest.
Every time I think about drinking less tea, I imagine my mornings without that warm cup.
And that thought probably makes you uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable.
That's because tea has become part of your routine.
It really has.
Many people have the same feeling with coffee.
Yes, but tea feels a little gentler.
I agree.
It's not just about energy, it's also about comfort.
The warmth of the cup
The smell of the tea.
and the quiet moment it creates.
Exactly.
That's why people often associate tea with calmness.
And relaxation.
Even the process of making tea can feel soothing.
Waiting for the water to boil.
Pouring the water into the cup,
Watching the tea slowly change color.
those small moments help people slow down.
I think that's one of the reasons tea culture has lasted for so many generations.
Because it's not just about the drink itself.
It's also about the experience around it.
A moment to pause during a busy day.
And maybe breathe a little.
Exactly.
Now I'm curious about something.
What is it?
The people listening right now probably have their own habits with tea.
That's very likely.
Some people might drink tea once a day.
Others might drink several cups.
And some people might not drink tea at all.
That's possible too.
But for those who do drink tea regularly, it often becomes part of the daily rhythm.
A small habit that shapes the day.
morning tea to start the day,
afternoon tea for a little energy.
and sometimes evening tea to relax.
A simple drink that fits many different moments.
Mike, earlier you mentioned something interesting about tea helping you wake up in the morning.
Yes, that quiet moment with tea before the day begins.
I think many people have a drink that helps them feel more awake.
That's true. Some people choose coffee, others prefer tea.
For me, tea feels like a gentle start to the day.
Gentle is the perfect word. Coffee can feel strong and fast, but tea feels calmer.
Exactly. It gives me a little boost of energy without feeling too intense.
That kind of boost is often called a pick-me-up.
A pick-me-up.
Yes, a pick-me-up is something that gives you energy when you feel tired.
That's a really useful phrase.
People use it often in everyday English.
So tea can be a pick-me-up in the morning.
Definitely. And sometimes in the afternoon, too.
That's when I usually feel my energy drop.
Around 3 or 4 in the afternoon?
Exactly. That's when I make another cup of tea.
And does it help?
It does. Even just sitting for a few minutes with a warm cup helps me relax.
That's interesting because the effect isn't only physical.
What do you mean?
Tea also helps mentally. The warmth, the smell, and the quiet moment together can make you feel refreshed.
I think the break itself is important.
Yes, sometimes stepping away from work for a few minutes can reset your focus.
That happens to me all the time.
You work for a while, feel tired, then take a tea break.
And when I come back, my mind feels clearer.
Tea becomes the reason for taking that small pause.
A very pleasant reason.
Another thing I enjoy about tea is drinking it slowly.
Me too. I like taking small, slow drinks.
There's a word for that.
Sip.
Exactly. To sip means to drink slowly in small amounts.
Like when you're enjoying a warm drink.
For example, you might say, she sipped her tea while reading a book.
That sounds very peaceful.
Tea is perfect for sipping because it encourages you to slow down,
And enjoy the moment.
which is very different from drinking something quickly when you're in a hurry.
Tea rarely feels rushed.
It feels like a small pause in a busy day.
Morning energy, afternoon pick-me-up, or evening relaxation.
A simple drink that fits many moments of life.
Mike, there's another thing I've noticed about tea.
What's that?
Tea isn't only something people drink alone. It's often very social.
That's a great point.
When people want to spend time together, they often say, "Let's have tea."
Yes, and sometimes the tea itself isn't the most important part.
The real purpose is the conversation.
Exactly. Tea becomes the reason to sit down and talk.
I've had many nice conversations with friends over tea.
Me too. It creates a relaxed environment.
No pressure, no rush, just a quiet place to talk.
There's a useful phrase connected to that.
Which one?
Catch up.
Catch up?
Yes, to catch up means to meet someone and talk about what has been happening in your lives.
Like when you haven't seen a friend for a while.
Exactly. You might say, let's meet for tea and catch up.
That sounds very natural.
It's a phrase people use all the time
Tea shops are perfect places for that.
because they usually feel calm and comfortable.
People sit together, talk slowly, and enjoy their tea.
And sometimes those conversations become very meaningful.
That's true. I've had deep conversations with friends while holding a warm cup of tea.
There's something about a warm drink that makes people feel more open.
Maybe it helps people relax.
I think so.
Tea creates a small, peaceful space where people can connect.
Which is probably why tea culture has remained so strong for so many years.
It's not just about the drink.
It's about the moment and the people sharing it.
And I think many of our listeners might recognize that feeling, sitting with someone, drinking tea, and talking about life.
Simple moments that become special.
Exactly. Mike, I think it's time for something fun.
That sounds interesting. What do you have in mind?
Let's play a little game.
I like games. What's this one called?
I call it, "What does your tea say about you?"
Oh, this should be good.
Okay, let's start simple. If someone drinks plain black tea every day, what does that say about them?
I would say they are practical people.
Practical?
Yes, they know what they like and they stick with it.
I agree. Black tea drinkers probably enjoy simple routines.
And they might be very organized.
All right, what about people who drink green tea all the time?
I imagine someone calm and health conscious.
Someone who likes balance in life.
Exactly.
Okay, here's another one. People who drink herbal tea every evening.
Those people probably love relaxing.
Maybe they enjoy quiet evenings.
Reading a book, listening to soft music.
That sounds very peaceful.
It does.
Now let's talk about people who try many different types of tea.
Ah, the explorers.
Yes, people who enjoy discovering new flavors.
They are probably curious personalities.
People who like learning and experiencing new things.
I think that's true.
And finally, what about people who add lots of honey or sugar to their tea?
I would say they enjoy comfort.
Maybe they like sweet moments in life.
That's a nice way to describe it.
Of course, this is all just for fun.
Yes, tea choices don't really define a person.
But sometimes our little habits say something about our personalities.
And tea habits are a great example of that.
Now, I'm curious about everyone listening.
Me too.
What does your favorite tea say about you?
Think about it while we move toward the final part of our conversation.
All right, Mike. Before we finish today's episode, let's do a quick word tour.
Good idea. We talked about several useful English words and phrases today.
The first one is brew.
To brew means to make tea or coffee by mixing it with hot water.
For example, I brew a cup of tea every evening before I relax.
Next is acquired taste.
An acquired taste is something you may not enjoy the first time, but after trying it several times, you begin to like it.
Green tea can be an acquired taste for some people.
The next word is sip.
To sip means to drink slowly in small amounts.
For example, she sipped her tea while reading a book.
Next, we talked about kick in.
Kick in means when the effect of something begins to work.
For example, after you drink tea, the caffeine might kick in after 20 minutes.
The next phrase is cut back on.
To cut back on something means to reduce how much of it you do or consume.
For example, I'm trying to cut back on sugar in my tea.
Next is pick-me-up.
A pick-me-up is something that gives you energy when you feel tired.
A cup of tea in the afternoon can be a nice pick-me-up.
Another useful phrase we discussed is catch up.
To catch up means to meet someone and talk about what has been happening in your lives.
For example, let's meet for tea this weekend and catch up.
And finally, guilty pleasure.
A guilty pleasure is something you enjoy even though you feel a little bad about it.
For example, sweet milk tea might be someone's guilty pleasure.
Those are some simple but very useful expressions you can start using in your everyday English.
Try listening for them in conversations or using them when you speak.
All right, everyone, that's our episode for today.
Thank you for spending this time with us here on Speak English Daily.
Whether you enjoy simple tea or love exploring different types, the important thing is enjoying the moment.
And maybe sharing that moment with someone else.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to follow Speak English Daily so you don't miss our next episodes.
And feel free to share this episode with a friend who also enjoys learning English.
Until next time, stay curious and keep practicing your English.
Goodbye, everyone.